Elera Vance existed in the spaces between. She moved through the forward operating base like a whisper, a ghost in a worn utility uniform. Her only notable feature the heavy, scarred camera body that seemed a permanent extension of her arm. She was the base photographer, a role the operators of SEAL Team 3 regarded with the same detached interest they might give a vending machine. She was a function, not a person. The base itself was a monument to brutal efficiency, carved from the dust and rock of a forgotten coastline. The air was a cocktail of jet fuel, salt spray, and ambition. Polished steel and hardened concrete defined every angle. It was a place of sharp lines and sharper men, a world where Elera, with her quiet ways and faded olive drab jacket, did not fit. Her presence was a soft curve in a world of right angles. Lieutenant Commander Thorne was the sharpest line of all. He walked as if he owned the ground beneath his boots, his team, Cutter and Jax, orbiting him like lesser moons. They were the apex predators of this ecosystem, their confidence a tangible force field. They moved with an economy of motion that bordered on arrogance, their laughter loud and sharp in the mess hall. They saw Elera setting up for a simple series of personnel file portraits near the hangars. Her equipment was laid out on a canvas sheet with meticulous care. Beside her state-of-the-art digital rig sat an old Nikon F3, its black paint worn to brass on the edges, a relic from a different era. Cutter nudged Jax, a smirk spreading across his face. "Look at that. Arts and Crafts Hour." Thorne didn't even break his stride. He glanced at the old film camera, a flicker of contempt in his eyes. "Make sure you get her good sides, sweetheart. It's the only action you're ever going to see out here." Elera said nothing. She didn't look up. Her hands moved with a steady, unbothered grace, adjusting a filter on her lens. The click of the mechanism was the only answer she gave. Their words were just noise, like the wind whipping off the sea. They were irrelevant to the task at hand. The light was fading. She had work to do. Her silence was a fortress they could not breach, and it infuriated them. To them, it was not strength but weakness, the quiet deference of someone who knew her place. They had decided her place was far below theirs. A week later, she was assigned to document a training exercise. It was a complex urban assault simulation in a mock village built on the far side of the base. The SEALs moved with lethal precision, a blur of motion and controlled violence. Elera moved with them, a shadow they constantly had to step around. She never got in the way. She was there, then she was not. She found angles in the chaos, capturing the intensity in a muzzle flash, the concentration in a sweat-streaked face. She worked with an unnerving calm. Her breathing, even while explosions rocked the ground and simulated gunfire, echoed off the concrete walls. During a lull, while the team reloaded magazines with practice speed, Jax cornered her against a bullet-pocked wall. He loomed over her, his bulk casting a long shadow. "You getting all this, Shutterbug?" he asked, his voice dripping with condescension. "Don't drop your little arts and craft box. This is grown-up stuff." She simply raised her camera and took his picture. The flash was blindingly bright in the dim alley. He flinched back, momentarily stunned. She lowered the camera. Her expression was unreadable. "Your stance is too wide," she said, her voice flat and low. "Exposes your femoral artery." She turned and walked away before he could process the comment, leaving him blinking in the alley, the ghost of the flash still dancing in his vision. The insult, delivered as a bland tactical observation, was more effective than any shout. It was a language he understood, and it came from a source he could not comprehend. The story spread through the team. Thor heard it from Cutter, who had seen the whole exchange. It did not amuse him. It was an anomaly, a break in the established order. The photographer was not supposed to talk back. She was not supposed to know about kill zones and femoral arteries. The mockery became more organized after that. It was no longer casual dismissal. It was a campaign. In the mess hall, they would talk loudly as she passed, discussing how a budget for a photographer could have paid for more grenades or a new optic. They started calling her Shutterbug to her face, the name always delivered with a sneer. Master Chief Petty Officer Riggs, the logistics chief who managed her assignments, picked up on their disdain. He was a man who clung to his small sliver of authority, and he derived satisfaction from enforcing the base's unspoken hierarchy. He began to micromanage her, questioning her use of supplies, demanding to see her shot lists in advance. "These are for combat documentation, Vance, not a photo album," he'd grumble, peering at her contact sheets. "Too much shadow. Too much empty space. I want pictures of the men, not the walls." He didn't understand that the empty spaces told a story, too. The campaign of petty cruelties escalated. Thorne made a public bet with another team leader. A case of beer said Vance would quit or request a transfer within the month. The rookie flop, they called it. The base was small, and word of the bet reached Elera within an hour. She heard it from a nervous galley worker who looked at her with pity. She finished her meal in silence, her expression unchanged. "Laugh now. You won't soon." Thorne took his complaint to the base commander, Captain Eva Rostova. Elera saw them talking from a distance. Thorne's rigid posture and emphatic gestures, Rostova's calm, almost placid demeanor. Rostova was a respected and imposing figure, an intelligence officer by trade who had earned her command through a legendary career in the shadows. She listened to Thorne without interruption. "Captain, with all due respect," Thorne said, his voice carrying on the wind, "we need trigger pullers, not tourists. She's a liability." Rostova's reply was too quiet for Elera to hear, but Thorne's posture deflated slightly as he walked away. He shot a venomous glare in Elera's direction. She had been noticed by authority, and it had made him look weak. He would not forget it. The sabotage came 2 days later. Elera had spent the morning documenting pre-mission checks for a critical reconnaissance operation Thorne's team was leading. The intel was thin, coming from a source of questionable reliability, but the target was high value. The mood on the base was tense. She downloaded her memory cards in her small, closet-sized office. When she turned back to her desk after grabbing a bottle of water, one of the primary cards was gone. She searched everywhere. It had contained all the shots from that morning, including detailed close-ups of the team's modified gear and the new satellite uplink schematics. She went to Master Chief Riggs. He leaned back in his chair, a smug look on his face. "A whole card? Sounds careless, Vance. That's sensitive material." "It was on my desk," she said, her voice even. "Maybe you misplaced it," Riggs suggested, already dismissing her. "In any case, your access to the mission debrief is revoked. Your photos are non-essential, and until you can account for that missing card, you're a security risk." He turned back to his paperwork. The conversation was over. He had cut her out, just as Thorne wanted. He had declared her equipment, and by extension, her a hazard. She walked out of his office, the set of her jaw like granite. "They think they can break me. They'll learn." She didn't need the missing card. She had a backup. She always had a backup. More importantly, she had her own eyes. And during the gear check, she had seen something. It was a small detail, a flicker of wrongness that had snagged in her mind. It wasn't on the digital shots. The resolution was too clean, too perfect. It was a feeling, a ghost in the light that she knew would only appear through the flawed, honest glass of her old Nikon. She returned to her office, which now felt more like a cage. The sounds of the base gearing up for the mission, the roar of an osprey, the staccato commands shouted across the tarmac, were a constant reminder of her exclusion. She sat in the dark, the red glow of the safe light casting long shadows on the walls. She developed the film from her F3 herself. It was a slow, methodical process, a ritual of chemistry and patience. As the image began to emerge in the developing tray, her breath caught. There it was. Faint, almost invisible, but undeniably there. She made a single, high-resolution print. The image was of Cutter inspecting the barrel of his rifle. It was a mundane shot, the kind Riggs would have dismissed as artistic nonsense. But in the background, reflected in the curved glass of a vehicle's side mirror far behind him, was a section of the base's perimeter fence. And on the other side of that fence, nestled in the scrub brush and heat haze, was something that did not belong. She took the print, and walked out of her office. The mission briefing was in full swing in the Tactical Operations Center. A Marine guard stood at the door. He moved to block her. "Sorry, ma'am. Essential personnel only." She didn't argue. She saw Master Chief Riggs walking down the hall and knew he would only obstruct her further. She needed to get to Thorne. She found him near the armory, going over a final checklist with Jax. She approached him directly, holding out the photograph. "Lieutenant Commander, you need to see this." Thorne took the print from her hand without looking at it, his eyes fixed on her. His expression was one of pure, distilled contempt. This was the culmination of his annoyance, this final, pathetic attempt by the outcast to be relevant. "Still trying to play with the big boys, Shutterbug?" he sneered. He finally glanced down at the photo, his face contorted in a mocking frown. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice loud enough for the other SEALs nearby to turn and watch. "A picture of a wall? Your dad teach you photography? Or did you learn it from a cereal box?" The insult was deeply personal, aimed at the worn camera she so often carried, the one that had belonged to her father. It was the final provocation. A line had been crossed. Her eyes, which were usually so placid and unreadable, hardened into chips of flint. He left it to his daughter. The thought was a blade of ice in her mind. It was not a memory of grief, but a statement of duty, a legacy to be honored. She didn't try to explain. She didn't raise her voice. She simply turned from him, leaving him holding the photograph, and walked with unhurried, implacable purpose toward the Tactical Operations Center. Thorne and Riggs, seeing where she was going, followed close behind, their faces thunderous. The Marine guard at the door saw her coming again. This time, she didn't slow down. He put a hand out to stop her. "Ma'am, I can't let you." She looked him in the eye. "Get the captain," she said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried an authority that made the young Marine hesitate. In that moment of hesitation, she pushed past him and into the room. The briefing room fell silent. Every head turned. 20 operators, the tech support crew, and Captain Rostova herself all stared as Elera Vance, the base photographer, walked to the front of the room. The main screen showed a satellite map of the target area. Thorne and Riggs burst in after her. "Captain, I apologize for this intrusion," Thorne snapped, his face flushed with anger. "Petty Officer Vance is not cleared for this briefing. She is being disruptive." Riggs chimed in, his voice tight with fury. "She's a security risk, Captain. I've confined her to quarters pending an investigation." Captain Rostova looked from the two furious men to the impossibly calm woman standing before the main screen. Elera hadn't even acknowledged their presence. She held a single sheet of photo paper. Rostova saw the resolve in Elera's eyes, a cold fire that she recognized from her own past. It was the look of someone who possessed absolute certainty. "Let her speak," Rostova said, her voice cutting through the tension. Thorne's jaw tightened, but he fell silent. Riggs looked like he had swallowed a hornet. All eyes were on Elera. She didn't speak. Not at first. Her movements were deliberate, economical. She walked to the main console, where young tech specialist, Petty Officer Kenji Tanaka, sat staring at her in bewilderment. She placed a photograph on his document scanner. "Put this on the main screen," she said. Tanaka looked to Captain Rostova, who gave a subtle nod. He scanned the image. Cutter's face appeared on the large display, his rifle prominent. In the background, the out-of-focus reflection in the mirror was visible. The room murmured in confusion. Thorne scoffed audibly. "This is a waste of time," he spat. "It's a blurry photo of nothing." Elera ignored him. Her attention was fixed on the screen. "Tanaka," she commanded, her voice steady. "Isolate the reflection in the passenger side mirror of the vehicle." "The resolution is garbage," Tanaka muttered, but his fingers flew across the keyboard. "It's completely pixelated." "It's not pixelated," Elera corrected him. "It's film grain. The silver halide crystals resolve detail differently. Just isolate the image." A magnified, blurry square filled the screen. It was a mess of indistinct shapes and colors. A few of the SEALs snickered. "Zoom in," Elera said. "Sector Gamma 7, right side of the frame." The image enlarged further. Enhance. Tanaka ran a standard sharpening algorithm. The image became a slightly less blurry mess. He shrugged, looking at her apologetically. That's the best I can do. There's no data there. You're using the wrong algorithm, Elera stated. You're trying to create lines. Don't. Run a differential spectral analysis. Isolate wavelengths above 700 nanometers. The lens on my F3 is coated with an old compound. It filters visible light, but captures a narrow band of near-infrared. Look for the heat, not the shape. Tanaka stared at her, his mouth slightly agape. That was an analysis technique used by NRO satellites, not by a base photographer. He typed a complex series of commands. The image on the screen flickered, then resolved into a new form. The blurry shapes were replaced by false color heat signatures. The snickering in the room died. There, in the scrub brush, just outside the perimeter fence, was the faint but unmistakable thermal outline of a man. He was lying prone, almost completely obscured by the terrain. One man, Thorne said, his voice tight. A lone observer. It's nothing. He's not an observer, Elera said calmly. He's a spotter. Look at the glint off his optics. She directed Tanaka to another part of the reflection. Now, trace a line of sight from his position. Tanaka worked, his initial skepticism replaced by frantic focus. A red line shot across the screen from the spotter's position, extending over the mock village used for training and terminating directly on the helipad where Thorne's team was scheduled to depart. He's watching your exfil point, Elera stated. But he's not the threat. The threat is what he's spotting for. She directed Tanaka to a different section of the photograph, a section of blank concrete wall on one of the training buildings. Zoom in here, on the scuff marks. The image magnified. A series of dark smudges became visible. Those aren't from boots, she explained. The angle is wrong. The material transfer is oil-based. That's where the bipod of a heavy machine gun was braced. Yesterday, the training exercise cleared that area. Those marks are new. A cold dread began to settle in the room. They had been watched. Their training exercise had been the enemy's reconnaissance. And now, she said, her voice dropping slightly, the kill box. She pointed to the original satellite map of their mission target, miles away. The intel says a single high-value target is in this building. She then directed Tanaka back to her photograph, to the reflection of a window pane on a distant structure. Inside that tiny, distorted reflection was another glint. Another spotter, someone whispered. No, Elera said. That's the objective. The HVT. He's not in the target building. He's a kilometer away, watching the building your intel sent you to. Your source wasn't unreliable. He was compromised. He fed you bait. She laid it out with chilling, irrefutable logic. The spotter at the base. The new marks in the training village. The target watching his own trap. It was a complex, layered ambush. Thorne's team was not being sent on a mission. They were being sent to their execution. The target building was rigged to explode, and anyone who survived would be cut down by interlocking fields of fire from concealed positions. The room was utterly silent, the only sound the faint hum of the servers. The operators stared at the screen, their faces pale. They were looking at ghosts of their own deaths. In the back of the room, an old Master Chief, a veteran of conflicts that were now just chapters in history books, squinted at Elera. He looked at the way she dissected the intelligence, the inhuman calm of her presentation. He leaned over to the man next to him. That's not just photography, he muttered. That's eidetic spectral analysis. The way she sees heat blooms and trace evidence. I haven't seen that since. His voice trailed off as a memory surfaced. He whispered a name that was spoken only in classified circles, a name that was more myth than fact. Ghostwatch. The name spread through the room like a shockwave. Ghostwatch, a legendary and supposedly defunct deep-cover intelligence unit known for its operatives' almost supernatural powers of observation. They were called the Gray Owls. They saw everything. Captain Rostova's eyes widened. She looked from the screen to Elera, then down at the faded, worn strap of the old Nikon camera Elera always carried. Stitched into the canvas, so faint it was almost invisible, was a small, stylized emblem of a ghost owl. Rostova's expression shifted from professional focus to profound, undisguised respect. She turned her gaze to Thorne, whose face was a mask of chalky disbelief. His entire world had just been dismantled by the woman he had dismissed as a tourist. "Lieutenant Commander," Rostova's voice was cold steel. "You will stand down. Your mission is scrubbed. You and your team will now listen to Specialist Vance. Her intelligence supersedes your own." She had called her specialist a rank, a history, an identity they never knew existed. The arrogance drained out of Thorne in a visible rush, replaced by a hollow, sickening realization. He had not been mocking a photographer. He had been mocking a legend. He stared at Elera, truly seeing her for the first time. The quiet woman with the old camera was more of a warrior than he could ever hope to be. He was speechless. Cutter and Jax looked at each other in terror, the memory of their petty taunts now feeling like sacrilege. Master Chief Riggs seemed to shrink in his uniform, his face turning a blotchy red as he tried to blend into the wall. He had sabotaged a Ghostwatch operative. His career was over. The energy in the room had transformed. The skepticism and mockery had evaporated, replaced by a stunned, reverent silence. The men who had laughed at her now looked at her with awe that bordered on fear. She had saved all of their lives from a room she wasn't even supposed to be in, using a photograph they had mocked. After the briefing was completely redrawn based on Elera's intelligence, the old Master Chief who had recognized the name walked up to her. He was a man of few words, his face a roadmap of hard-won experience. He stood before her, looked her in the eye, and gave a slow, deliberate nod. It was a gesture of immense respect, an acknowledgement from one quiet professional to another. Kenji Tanaka approached next, his face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and excitement. "How?" he stammered, gesturing at the screen. "How did you even see that? The pixel deviation is less than 0.01%. The heat signature was barely above ambient. It's statistically invisible." Elera finally looked away from the tactical display. She met his gaze, her expression softening almost imperceptibly. "You have to know where to look," she said. It was the only explanation she offered. The consequences for the antagonists were swift and silent. There was no public reprimand. Thorne was quietly reassigned to a desk job at a training command in San Diego. His career as a frontline operator finished. The official reason was a failure to properly assess mission intelligence, a black mark from which he would never recover. Master Chief Riggs was investigated for obstruction and dereliction of duty. He was demoted and moved to a supply depot in the middle of the desert. They simply vanished from the base, their fall from grace as quiet as Elera's vindication. Captain Rostova called Elera to her office the next day. A formal commendation was on her desk, along with an offer for a senior analyst position on her intelligence staff. "Your skills are wasted here, specialist," Rostova said. "We need you." Elera looked at the papers, then back at the captain. "With respect, Captain," she replied, her voice soft. "My place is behind a lens. That's where I see things clearly." She respectfully declined the commendation and the promotion. She did not seek accolades or a change in status. She had not acted for revenge or recognition. She had acted because the work required it. The next morning, she was back out on the tarmac, her old Nikon F3 hanging from its worn strap. She was the base photographer. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. As she framed a shot of maintenance crew working on an engine, a group of SEALs walked past. They stopped talking as they approached her. They gave her a wide berth. Every one of them, from the newest recruit to the team leader, met her eyes and gave a respectful nod. No one called her Shutterbug again. Her story became a quiet legend, passed in hushed tones in the barracks and workshops. They called her the ghost of the lens, the quiet photographer who saw the invisible. The base training doctrine was fundamentally rewritten to include advanced photographic reconnaissance analysis. A new module titled The Vance Method, her single act had changed the way they saw the world around them. A few weeks later, a young seaman apprentice named Miller, who worked in the communications shack, approached her. He was nervous, clutching a small, consumer-grade camera in his hands. "Mom," Specialist Vance, he stammered. I, I heard what you did. I was wondering, could you teach me? Not the secret stuff. Just how to frame a shot. How to see things properly. Elera looked at the earnest, hopeful young man. She saw a flicker of her younger self in his eyes, a desire to capture the truth of a moment. A small, rare smile touched her lips. Keep your elbows in, she said, her voice gentle. It steadies the camera. She took her old Nikon from around her neck and held it out to him. Here, she said, let me show you. As the sun set over the base, casting long shadows across the concrete, the hidden legend became the quiet mentor. Her legacy passed on not in medals or official records, but in the simple act of teaching someone else how to see.